Ultrawide or 16:9? It's the ultimate question that people ask themselves when they're upgrading to their next monitor. Today we're going to be comparing my daily driver, the Acer X34 Predator, to one of MSI's new offerings, the MPG 27CQ, a 1440p VA curved panel, but the spec that really interests me here is the 144Hz refresh rate. As some of you guys know, the Acer X34 Predator tops out at just 100Hz, and so a lot of people are asking themselves whether that extra 44Hz is worth it, or whether the wider aspect ratio is the way to go. Now, if you have a ton of cash and just want the best of both worlds, there are a couple of the higher refresh rate ultrawide panels on the market, one of them being the Alienware 3418DW, which I reviewed a few months ago, a 3440 by 1440 panel with a refresh rate of 120Hz. If you don't mind the slightly lower resolution though, there are a couple 2560 by 1080 options out there, like the LG 34UC89G, which has a refresh rate of 144Hz, which can be overclocked all the way up to 166. Now, aside from refresh rates, there's a lot of other things to talk about as well, including the fact that ultrawide displays are more expensive than even the highest refresh rate 16:9 displays. And before I give you my opinions on 16:9 versus 21:9 displays for gaming, discuss pricing and what your options are, let's first address the facts when it comes to game support for a 21:9 display, and more specifically, whether or not you're actually gaining any horizontal field of view and competitive advantage. Let's start with the most popular game currently out, and that's Fortnite. I'll admit that my experience in this game here is extremely limited, with under an hour played in total, but the ultrawide support here is almost unfair. So here's our standard 16:9 display, giving us a fairly good view of what's going on, but stepping up to 21:9 gains a fairly significant amount of horizontal field of view with no vertical crop whatsoever. This means that players that would otherwise be cropped by a 16:9 display are now visible in a single frame. Now, since Fortnite is played from a third-person perspective, this means that players on an ultrawide are at a competitive advantage when it comes time to peek around corners while trying to maintain cover at the same time. This is because the extra horizontal field of view gives you a ton more room to work with, allowing you to have a full view around a corner without even trying. Next, let's talk about PUBG, and again starting with our 16:9 display, choosing some reference points, for example the tree trunk on the right and the house on the left, we can see pretty much perfect support here as well. There's a noticeable horizontal field of view gain, and here there is a very slight vertical crop, but it's nothing major in my opinion. The field of view gained here could definitely be helpful in spotting players, vehicles, or gun flashes, whereas on the left of the house and the right of the tree, the 16:9 display would be completely cropped out. Here's a clip where you can actually see that in action, where the enemies on the right would otherwise be cropped out on a 16:9 display. It's also important to note here that even though I was able to spot them, it did take me a couple seconds to recognize that these were actually enemies, since they were in my peripheral vision, so just keep that in mind. Alright, what about everyone's favorite competitive game, CSGO? Well, here I was surprised to see perfect support. There's no vertical crop at all when extending the frame outwards, and there is a ton more horizontal gain, where we can now see enemies that would be hiding behind the blocks here on the left and on the staircase here on the right, all in a single frame. Still though, 16:9 remains the aspect ratio of choice when it comes to competition, seeing as the support for 16:9 monitors go all the way up to 240Hz, but mostly it's because 16:9 is just the standard when it comes to a monitor's aspect ratio. For competitive titles like this though, a single millisecond could be the difference between losing or winning a tournament worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, so here the faster response times and high refresh rates are worth it over a wider field of view. Overwatch, however, has zero support for the 21:9 aspect ratio, with no horizontal field of view gained at all, and only a significant vertical crop to achieve the wider aspect ratio. Seeing as Overwatch is predominantly a competitive title, I can understand their reasoning here, but with games like CSGO including support, it would definitely be nice to have support here as well. My suggestion here to Blizzard to make both the esports and ultrawide community happy would be at least to restrict 21:9 support to the casual playlists only, and then have the current vertical cropping restricted for competitive playlists. That way there's no harm done with the extra field of view. And for Witcher 3, the 21:9 support is flawless, as you would hope for at this point, and this is definitely one of those games where gaming on an ultrawide display is far more enjoyable than on a 16:9 display. This game feels like it was built for ultrawide displays, being able to see and enjoy a wider field of view of the beautiful Witcher 3 environment. And as with PUBG, Fortnite and CSGO, the HUD is pushed off to the side to fit the wider aspect ratio. Another genre where gaming in 21:9 can provide a more immersive experience is in racing games, and here in Dirt 4, the support is thankfully flawless yet again. No vertical crop here either, with a significantly wider cabin view, now able to see the passenger side window and a lot more of what's going on outside. Here you get a lot more sense of speed and awareness when driving, whereas going back to a 16:9 display definitely feels a lot narrower and artificial. So overall, the ultra-wide support for some games does seem pretty good, but you'll always find that one game here or there which does seem to punish you for playing on that 21:9 aspect ratio. Now, another big factor here is the cost, and there are plenty of options out there, but generally an ultra-wide display will cost a decent amount more than a similarly spec'd 16:9 gaming monitor. I'll include some solid options in the description below in addition to the two monitors that we're looking at today, but as an example, you can pretty much get the best 16:9 gaming monitor currently out there for about $750 US, but a similarly spec'd out ultra-wide display will cost you over $1,000, and even then you are getting a lower refresh rate. On the budget end, and for those who don't care about Nvidia's G-Sync to eliminate screen tearing, you can still get a high refresh rate 16:9 panel for under $200, but on the budget end for ultra-wide panels, you're looking at something like the LG 29UM68 for $200 more, and although you are getting that 21:9 aspect ratio and an IPS panel, the refresh rate here is a much lower 75Hz, and it's not height adjustable either. Now let's talk about refresh rate for a minute, because as I said in the beginning of the video, I really wanted to compare 100Hz on my ultra-wide monitor to the 144Hz on the 16:9 MSI monitor and evaluate the difference. If you've seen my comparison between the 120Hz Alienware 3418DW and the 100Hz Acer X34 Predator, you'll remember that I said back then that I could notice the difference between the two, describing the X34 Predator as almost there in terms of a buttery smooth experience, and that the 120Hz on the Alienware was pretty much at the point where you don't think about the refresh rate at all. The same goes for 144Hz as you would guess, but I'd argue that after 120, it's pretty hard to distinguish a difference. The metric that you should really be looking for here though when it comes to comparing monitor smoothness is frame times. That is the interval between each frame and not the refresh rate. This is because we should be concerned with the delay between each frame and not how many frames are displayed per second, which is fairly arbitrary and can be misleading when the frame times are improved. For example, if we compare a 60Hz display to a 100Hz display, we can observe about a 3.3 millisecond reduction in the delay between each frame. Now, the difference between 60Hz and 100Hz is 40Hz. So if we compare 140Hz now, we're now getting a 2.9 millisecond improvement in frame times, which was less than before. And this trend continues where 180Hz is only a 1.5 millisecond improvement, almost half to what we compared in the previous jump. So for those who say they can't really tell the difference beyond a 144Hz display, this mathematically makes sense. To sum this all up, I feel like between 100 and 144Hz is going to be the sweet spot for most people, and really going beyond 144 is going to give you diminishing returns. So if you're a little bit more budget conscious, then a 16:9 display is the way to go, since you have a ton more lower cost, high refresh rate options. It's also the way to go if you're an esports enthusiast or streamer, seeing as 16:9 is still the standard for most displays out there, and you've got support for refresh rates up to 240Hz. For those who don't mind saving up a little bit of cash though, an ultra-wide monitor will give you a wider field of view and an arguable competitive advantage in some games as well, and in my opinion, a more enjoyable experience. Talking about enjoyable experiences though, TunnelBear is the private VPN. Okay, in all seriousness, I just wanted to announce that Intel Extreme Masters is on this weekend in Sydney, and I will be attending and doing a little bit of filming, so expect a post-event wrap-up video coming up next week. A huge thanks to MSI for covering my entry for the grand final on this Sunday, which should be very epic, but more importantly for the nice little giveaway that I'll announce next week, so stay tuned for that. This will be my first esports event, so I honestly have no idea what to expect, but from the outside looking in, it does look extremely epic, and I have been a bit of a fan on the outside of competitive gaming. As always guys, don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future, and I'll see you all in the next one.